Pareto Principle. It was first introduced by Joseph Juran and named after the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto. It is also known as the 80-20 rule or the law of the vital few and trivial many. In essence, what it says is that about 80% of your results are caused by just 20% of your efforts. This can be adapted to many other areas of business. For example, 80% of your income comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of complaints are from 20% of customers. 80% of profits are from 20% of investments. Even some Microsoft executives once said that 20% of their bugs cause 80% of the errors. And I think you'll agree with me that in software development, 20% of the code has 80% of the errors. An important thing to remember about the Pareto principle is that the two values don't always need to add up to 100. So for example, you can have 64% of results coming from 4% of your work. What stays the same is the principle that most of your results come from a small percentage of your time. And what you should do is make that time frame as productive as possible and even expand it if possible. Here's an example of an application of the Pareto principle done by Jack Welch, arguably the CEO of the century, that he did while he ran and grew General Electric. Each year, the top 20% of the employees got raises and awards. Mid 70% were encouraged to become the top 20%, and the bottom 10% were fired. This way, the company was constantly evolving, and it did so for years under his leadership. You should apply the same strict model to your time. The most rewarding activities should be done when you are rested and energized and should have priority over all other activities. So let's do a quick two-part exercise that can help you identify what activities bring you the most results. The first part is one where you have to be completely honest with yourself and separate actual work from busy work. If it makes it easier for you, I'll confess my sins first. Whenever I have to write a script for a new course or plan a new campaign and I don't really feel like it, what I do is open my inbox and start answering some emails. And I am fully aware that's not what I should be doing and that's not a good way to start out my day, yet I do it anyway. A few hours later, when I finally make the courage to start the hard work, I always say to myself, this is not as difficult as I expected. If I had started earlier today when I had more energy, I would have been better off. Instead of focusing my most energized moments on the vital few, I spent it on the trivial many. Obviously, you're more qualified to separate your productive efforts from busy work than I am. So you should take a few minutes, or even longer if needed, and split your responsibilities into these two categories and make sure your most energized and focused moments are spent doing the productive and impactful actions. If your role in the organization is more complex, then here is a more formalized strategy to determine what task to do first. Grab a pen and paper and write down all your to-dos for today or for this week. Now you need to try and quantify as accurately as possible the effort and results for each item on that list. Assign to each to-do an effort value from 1 to 10 and a results value from 1 to 10. 10 being a huge effort or result and 1 being a small effort or result. Then divide results by efforts and you will get a priority value for each list item. To get the most out of your day, just start working on the tasks with the highest priority value first. Even if you will not complete all of them, you will always get the most results for your efforts. But you can also use the Pareto principle in more creative ways. Let's say you have 3 hours and plan on reading 3 well-documented articles in your field of expertise. A great way to tackle this is to just skim through 12 articles for 1 hour and then allocate 2 hours to read in detail the 2 most useful ones in the group. This way, you get the best value for your time spent reading. Or let's say you have to write a blog post for your organization. Instead of allocating an hour to writing, allocate 10 minutes to brainstorm ideas, then 50 minutes to write an article centered around the best idea you had during the brainstorming session. The same approach can be applied to all types of activities. So a quick exercise before moving on to the next video is to think of creative ways to tackle your existing work to get more value from your time by using the Pareto Principle. The rule of thumb is to sacrifice a portion of your total available time to identify the high reward activities and prioritize those. Coming up next, we'll talk about the Pomodoro Technique and the state of flow. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. The Pomodoro Technique and the state of flow. If someone had told me that one of the most famous time management techniques of this decade would be based on a kitchen timer in the shape of a tomato, I wouldn't have believed it. Well, the Pomodoro Technique proves that great ideas are not limited to laboratories and research centers, but kitchen counters as well. So what is it and how does it work? It's actually quite simple. It's based on the idea that if you structure your time in chunks of productive, uninterrupted work with small breaks in between, you will get far more done than usual. So what you do is work 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. Each continuous 25 minutes is a Pomodoro. After 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer 15 to 30-minute break. And believe me, you'll be amazed by how much you can get done by zoning out and focusing on a single task at a time. You'll be surprised by your results with as little as 6 Pomodoros a day. And look, I'm completely aware that some of you can't just shut off the world and will get interrupted. That's why you might need to set in place a protocol to deal with distractions. So here's a 3-step formula to prevent Pomodoro interruptions. Number 1, inform people of what you're doing and ask them if possible not to interrupt your Pomodoros. You'll be amazed by the willingness of people to support you in this little experiment if you just ask kindly. Number 2, negotiate a time where you can discuss what they wanted to ask. And once again, you'll be pleasantly surprised that most urgent interruptions were not really that urgent after all. And number 3, make time for those discussions. As others supported your plans, make sure to be helpful with their own problems that need your input after completing your Pomodoros. As far as tools for using the Pomodoro Technique, you can either go for the old school physical timers that can cost anything from $5 to $10, or go with an app version. I prefer apps for multiple reasons. For starters, they have increased functionality and you have many options to choose from. I always oscillated between the Focus Timer and Forest. They are both great apps. However, Forest has this great feature where you can work with others on the same Pomodoro and you get that sense of camaraderie on top of being more productive. And that's pretty much all you need to get started with the Pomodoro Technique. Now comes the interesting part. As I said at the start of the course, I want this to be the only time management material you'll ever need. And with that in mind, I want to present you the other end of the continuum when it comes to staying focused. I'm referring to the state of flow. That almost trance-like state where hours pass like minutes, where you're fully immersed in a task and feel as if things are on autopilot, and you get an enormous productivity boost, also called hyperfocus. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, a psychology and management professor at Claremont University, studied and researched the concept of flow extensively. In fact, I recommend you read his book, Flow, or at least listen to his TED Talk after watching this course. He states that flow happens when you are doing a task that challenges you in a field you're also highly skilled in. So here's the complete chart of the challenge versus skill level mental states. As you can see, flow is somewhere between arousal and control. And obviously, if you had no skill and a big challenge, you'll get to worry or have anxiety. But if you have a high skill level and a small challenge, you get relaxed and bored. So now you might ask yourself, which one is better? To focus and stay in that state of flow for as long as possible, or to use the Pomodoro technique and constantly interrupt yourself every 25 minutes. And there is no right or wrong answer here. The one that works best for you is the one you should aim for. However, keep in mind that even if they seem on the opposite ends of the continuum, they both require the same thing: to keep your attention on a single task and not get distracted. We'll talk more on this and multitasking in the following video. For the time being, I recommend you experiment with both and stick with the one that works best for you. For example, quite often I don't track my time for the entire day. However, starting my morning with a Pomodoro gets me in a state of let's get some work done. And both approaches have their own unique benefits. All those 5-minute Pomodoro breaks will be a good occasion to get up from your chair, move around the room for a bit, and also reduce your eye strain. So, if you're not as in shape as you want to, doing some Pomodoros will not only help you be more productive, but also get healthier. As for the state of flow, what I didn't tell you is that the study initially focused on what makes people happy and creative, and the data shows that the more you are in that state of flow, the more fulfilled you become with your profession. So whatever technique you choose, you always improve something. It's all down to what's more important to you right now. And that was it for flow and Pomodoros. Coming up next, we'll discuss a concept that will boost your productivity independent of technique, and that is understanding the gray zone and measuring time based on energy levels, not just hours spent at the office alone. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. The gray zone and measuring productivity in energy, not time alone. Okay. So here's something that I found myself guilty of quite often, and I bet you've fallen into this trap at least once. It is the productivity sin of not being focused on what you are currently doing. More precisely, thinking about how nice it would be if you were with friends or family while at work, and what's even worse, thinking about work when at home with friends and family, because you didn't really focus as you should have when at the office. And this mix of guilt, procrastination, and lack of focus is the gray zone, never being fully focused and engaged with the task at hand. No one else this happens when you commit yet another productivity mistake, multitasking. In a study by the same Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi I mentioned in the previous video, he states that the human brain can only process 110 bits of information per second. That's why you can't listen to 2 or 3 people talking at the same time and focus, because listening and understanding takes about 60 bits of information per second to process. Multitasking robs you of true focus and creates the illusion of productivity. It does have moments when it can be useful, like with repetitive and automated tasks that don't require creativity and focus. However, for the tasks that require creativity and big brain time, like I like to call it, multitasking is a curse. So let's do an exercise that will help you more easily avoid the gray zone and help you focus on what's important. Let's call the time you're most productive your talent time, because that's when you use your strengths to generate value and achieve your goals. Similarly, let's call renewal time the moments when you relax, refresh, and recharge. Now, what I want you to do is pause this video and write down a list of activities for each of the 2 categories. Activities where you utilize your strengths and activities when you renew. After doing this first step, you will have to identify for each activity the friction blocks that stop you from doing it, and also think of conditions and structures that favor its occurrence and completion. I know this exercise might seem trivial. It's similar to you going through your phone and removing the apps you want to stop using and bringing the apps you would like to use more often to your main screen. It won't solve all your problems and make you productive overnight, yet it will move you in the right direction. And if repeated enough, this productivity technique, where you do a self-inventory of your activities, will become a habit. And as Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. So once again, remember to avoid the gray zone. Identify your talent and renewal activities and set up systems to favor their occurrence. If you want to learn more on this topic, I recommend reading Tony Schwartz's The Power of Full Engagement. In the book, authors Tony Schwartz and Jim Lower discuss to great extent this approach of energy, not time, being the fundamental currency for high performance. They worked with top athletes and researched how to get peak performance at specific times. In their study, they identified that full engagement relies on 4 sources: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. A great way to look at this is similar to how muscles work. You get reduced capacity both from overuse and from underuse. To expand your limits, you must systematically go beyond your comfort zone. However, having to consciously do this requires a lot of effort and is not sustainable in the long run. That's why in the book, the authors recommend you create a ritual, a habit that ensures you don't need to use conscious energy all the time. They go into even greater depth as to what helps with creating habits, things like exercise, nutrition, and sleep, but we'll cover all those aspects in detail later in the course. So we'll end this here, and coming up next, we have a very atypical list of 10 timeless time management techniques according to Dan Kennedy, one of the most successful copywriters and authors on online marketing, business development, and productivity in general. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.